Hi, I'm Scott Ott, and this is a special edition of Bill Whittle Now. Today was the hearings before the Senate Judiciary Committee, where the committee listened to the testimony of Dr. Christine Blasey Ford as well as Judge Brett Kavanaugh. The accusations from Ford, the defense from Kavanaugh. Bill Whittle, I want to cut to the chase right here. We saw a new Brett Kavanaugh, I think, an impassioned defender not only of himself, but of the process of advice and consent that the Senate is supposed to give. He used some terms that you would not expect to hear a circumspect judge use, called the proceedings disgusting, particularly called out the Democrats for that, said that this experience for him has been hell and then some, and suggested that there would be payback if Democrats conducted themselves in this manner. Bill, did the judge lose his cool?
Yeah, along with the rest of the country. I'll tell you, Scotty, I'll tell you my first reaction to what I saw today, and I'm not proud of it, but I don't want to live here anymore.
What about this sets it apart from all the other reasons why one might not want to live here anymore when you look at politics?
This isn't politics anymore. This is about, it's not, and it's not even about the rule of law anymore. It's about the entire idea of law in the first place. It's the entire idea of law that is going on here right now. And I don't know how this vote's going to go, but if Kavanaugh is not approved, then draw your own conclusions. Listen, I'm going to say this for the sake of the argument to make it very clear. Maybe it happened, and maybe it didn't happen. This isn't the first time in all of human history that we've had this kind of conflict, you know. Our entire society has been set up to deal with these kind of conflicts. One person says one thing, another person says something else. Somebody says you murdered that guy, the other guy says I didn't do it. How do we know what to do? Well, over the course of 2,000, 3,000 years of civilization, we've come to figure out a few things. And one of them is to apply a set of rules. And these rules are supposed to be standardized. They're supposed to be above the level of emotion. And in America, the first of those rules is you are innocent until you are proven guilty. Now, needless to say, this woman did not prove that he was guilty. She didn't prove anything. And for all those people who say you always have to believe the woman in a case like that, you ask the guys who were implicated in that in the
Duke Lacrosse
rape thing. Yeah, the rape. Where was it? Virginia Tech.
I believe it was Duke.
Duke. Sorry. Yeah, you ask those guys if she needs to be believed, because she made the whole thing up. We find a lot of these left-wing people talking about right-wingers, broke into their store, they painted a Nazi swastika on the side of their shop, and it was all made up, all of it, by them in order to get sympathy. So look, this is where we are now as a country, Scott. I'll tell you what I think in terms of my political take on it. I think I've already made it pretty clear how I feel about it personally. But my political take on it is this. I think Kavanaugh breaking down into tears will probably save his nomination. And I am absolutely disgusted, appalled, mortified, horrified, terrified that now we live in a country where whoever can put on the most, pathetic maudlin display of emotion is the one that wins, when in fact we have a very clear set of rules about whether or not somebody is guilty, and we have a further set of rules about how to certify a president's Supreme Court nominee. Was it you who told me what the voting on Scalia was a couple days ago?
Yeah, it was 98-0.
98-0. 98-0 for Antonin Scalia, the most conservative judge on the Supreme Court, was approved 98-0. So if you want to know what 8 years of Barack Obama have done to this country, now you know.
Bill, let's take the other side of this. Dr. Christine Blasey Ford testified before the committee today. She was interviewed for the most part. Democrats on the committee interviewed her, but the Republicans decided to outsource that, so to speak, to a prosecutor who is accustomed to handling sexual assault cases. And she handled that in a very anodyne fashion. It was a very flat kind of, just the facts, ma'am, question and answer session. This is not a legal proceeding as such. It is an opportunity for the Senate to gather information and to offer advice and consent to the president's nominee for the court. And because of that, Christine Blasey Ford didn't need to go in there and prove anything. One writer I read today, I believe in Politico.com, basically said what she proved was that she wasn't a shill, she wasn't a Democrat plant, she wasn't an actor, and that she came across as believable. And Bill, I think the argument can be made that is all she needed to do because it is not a court case.
Well, you could make that argument in post-truth America, in post-law America, yes. You could make the argument that, oh, she cried very convincingly, I'm sure he must have done it. I'm not saying I wasn't there, you weren't there, Scott. That's why we have the law, for God's sake, right? You weren't there, I wasn't there, then nobody on that committee was there, no one was there. That's why when somebody says one thing and somebody says something else, the burden of proof is on the person making the accusation, not on the person defending themselves. Because if it's on the person defending themselves, I can say that Dr. Ford molested 15 young boys in various sessions of her therapy session between the years, let's say 1989 and 1993. And now I want her to prove to me that she didn't do this. I want her to prove to me that she didn't do it. It's impossible to prove a negative like this. And the reason, in my opinion, why these charges, not the charges, the specifics are so vague is because the vaguer they are, the more impossible they are to disprove. The burden of proof is not on Kavanaugh, it's on her. And if you're one of these people who says that the woman must always be believed, well, we've already given you a couple cases where they're certainly lying for whatever personal reason. I've seen a picture of Dr. Ford standing out in the street with a sign that says, Trump is not my president. That a lot of people don't like Donald Trump. And there's a lot of Democrats that don't like Donald Trump. But there's not an awful lot of people that are willing to make a sign and go stand in the middle of the road with it. So what do you say, Scott? What do you say? And the only thing that I would add to this finally is simply this. If Kavanaugh is not confirmed, then that simply, more than anything, rewards this kind of behavior. And when I say this kind of behavior, I'm not talking about whether or not he actually committed these things. I'm talking about the fact that this committee had all of that information from Dr. Ford for 2 months. 2 months they had it and sat on it until the votes were about to be counted. And then they dropped this nuclear weapon on things. This is how the country goes apart. This is how civilization ends. This is how, forget democracy. The whole reason we have a republic instead of a democracy is to avoid situations like the one we saw today in Congress. That's why we have rules.
Judge Kavanaugh pointed out that as soon as this matter was brought to light, he immediately said that it should be investigated by any entity, whether that was the Senate committee, whether that was the FBI. He wanted to do that. But for 10 long days, they did not do that. And then they come to this kind of a process. But Bill,
10 long days? 10 long days. They had 3 long months.
Yeah, no, what I'm saying, from when that information came to light to the public, he said, let's do it. Let's do it. I opened myself up to an FBI investigation. He categorically denied it. And let me just say one other thing. Judge Kavanaugh basically said, I wasn't there. I'm not a participant. I've never been part of anything like this. However, it's possible that Dr. Ford was actually sexually assaulted by someone, and that is horrible. And he also brought up the fact that the other night when his daughters were praying, one of them said, let's pray for the woman. And this is the kind of people they are. But I throw that out there to say none of that matters, Bill, because it's not a legal case. It's a political case. And let me ask you this. How do you overcome the challenge of having a lot of women in this country who actually have been sexually assaulted, who have felt like that women will not be believed? And when you say, or someone like you says, I don't believe this woman, they hear, we shouldn't believe women.
I've got to be very careful about this because I don't want to implicate anybody personally. Let's just say that I had a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship with somebody in my life at some point in the past where she was a victim of sexual assault at the workplace. And and the reason I knew this was because she was crying immediately, and I knew all of this because she was shaking. She was so upset. And she was able to prove it in fairly short order. She had all kinds of corroborating evidence. Now, look, this isn't the point, Okay, it's not the point. The point is not whether or not he did this. The point is, do we have the presumption of innocence in this country or not? And the left doesn't want us to have the presumption of innocence, because if the presumption of innocence exists, then they have to actually prove these outrageous charges and not simply make them, Scott. You know, the whole French Revolution, we're turning into the French Revolution. I accuse you, really? Of what? Of being against the counter-revolution. Well, in that case, I guess we better take him off and cut off his head. And that's exactly what happened. And this started with Bork when the Democrats did the same thing. And it got nastier with Clarence Thomas, which was what, 92, 91, 92, somewhere in there, 90. So every time they bring this back, this last-minute defense of their Supreme Court stranglehold, it gets nastier and uglier. And listen, this is life or death for the Democrats. They cannot get people to vote for their policies. That's why they never talk about their policies. So they can't get a majority of the Congress. They can't get the presidency. They can't do things the right way. And every single thing that they've accomplished in the last 40 years has been accomplished by convincing 5 people, that this is what has to happen. They've turned the Supreme Court into something that overturns legislation that is legally enacted by the Congress. It was never the Supreme Court's role. And all of this comes down to, is there a law left, yes or no? Because if there's not a law left, then he's not going to be confirmed, because people are going to say she really looks like she believes this happened. He looked like he believed his story too, which is why I said the disgusting thing about this is whatever chance he has now is going to be predicated on the fact that now both people are emotional and crying, and which one of them do we believe? And this is not supposed to happen, Scott. In a civilized nation with 250 years of history behind it, we shouldn't have to be in a situation where we have to decide now who is going to be nominated to the Supreme Court on the basis of who cried the most. It's just absolutely disgusting, and I'm just sick and tired of it, and I don't want to live in the same country with these people anymore. And I'll tell you this last thing, Scotty. If this doesn't motivate people to get out and vote in November against this kind of lynch mob, then you and I and all of us deserve everything that's coming to us, and it's coming soon.
This has been a special edition of Bill Whittle Now. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making it possible. Make sure you click the notification button on YouTube so you don't miss an episode of this show. And why not join the citizen producers over at BillWhittle.com to make this kind of content more widely available. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making everything happen.